So I just wanted to start with kind of where I always start with patients on when it comes to taking responsibility for addiction. We have a lot of theories, a lot of people say, oh, it's just a personal choice, just stop. What do you say to people that say it's just a personal choice?
To stopping or to starting?
Either or both.
Well, personal choice could sometimes be subconsciously influenced by, your environment and other people in your life. My mom, I was around drugs ever since a child, so my mom and my stepdad and cousins, families, and friends were always doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Drinking, smoking weed, the list goes on, cocaine, etc. So, but in that atmosphere, I still made the personal choice to do it.
Yeah.
The first time I smoked weed, I told my mom, she was smoking with my cousin and a couple other family members, and I was like, well, if y'all don't let me smoke, I'm just going to call the cops. And I was a young kid, like not even in high school yet, so I made the personal choice, but I didn't have the mature mind to understand the choices that I was making. So sometimes a personal choice is a choice made not personally understanding.
Yeah, an immature choice, obviously, at that age. But then we talk about the biology of reward. So what happens in addiction is there's actually new neural pathways that go into the brain based on whatever you're using, and it becomes an actual biological problem that you then have to address. A lot of times, untreated mental health concerns. What would you say about that?
I agree. I don't know, as not being a doctor, if that also leads to untreated mental health concerns.
Right. What came first, the chicken or the egg,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Yep. And then learned behavior. You talked about, you were a kid and everyone around you was using. And so that's how you thought you had fun. That's how you thought you coped. I mean, you learned that at a very young age. So we see that a lot. Those environments, and a lot of people think there's a genetic factor to addiction. We don't actually, have a specific gene that we can pinpoint. We do see it in families, whether that's genetic or learned behavior. We're not quite sure, but even if there is a genetic component, it's one of the smaller pieces, right? Because you can choose and you can stop this biology of reward and you can get your mental health treated and we can learn better coping strategies and things like that. So these are the kind of things that I talk about when it comes to addiction. And we often start with a thought map. Sometimes I'll start with like personal vision, but we've had a conversation and I know that your personal vision is to be sober. When did that come about for you?
Unfortunately, like a lot of people in the same situation, I lost everything through an accident that could have easily been handled just by knocking on someone's door. I lost my car, my Jeep, all my tools, and my diesel mechanic position at the company I was working with. I got a DUI, and unfortunately, or fortunately, no one was hurt, nothing.
Was that your first DUI?
It was my second. I got my first DUI when I was 17 before I even had a driver's license. And didn't get my license to 27. I swore I'd never make that mistake again. But 10 years later, still in addiction, you're still making the same mistakes. These mistakes will consistently reoccur if they're not fixed, and a lot of times they'll make your life worse. My lawyer actually is the one that saw the pain in me and got me the help I needed.
And what kind of help did you get?
Initially, I went to a mental health hospital, something Peaks, and Centennial Peaks, and I went there to detox and really get my suicidal ideations and actions understood from someone else's perspective. Really.
So you really got not just to a financial and physical kind of low, but you're on a very emotional low.
Yes, I've been an emotional roller coaster my whole life. It's from past traumas to personal traumas to your dark shadow. So I've committed attempted suicide multiple times and had miracles every time to save my life, from pastors to best friends to people that aren't even in the same state as me, making the right phone call and having.
So would you say you struggle with depression?
I was, yes, definitely. I can still see those, they creeping in every now and again.
Yeah. So let's actually map depression. I think that's a, you know, men don't like to talk about that, right? So you almost go from depression to suicide, right? Because, you know, anything in between there, you don't, you know, it maybe doesn't feel comfortable kind of talking about. But let's write the word depression. So let's just stay in the here and now. In your sobriety, when does depression come up for you? What's going on now that maybe has you feeling depressed?
Something my sponsor pointed out would be trying to be the best at everything and not accepting mediocrity.
So like perfectionism?
Perfectionism would definitely be a great one.
Okay. What about that? Give me some examples of.
Well, staying in the here and now, I just know I don't want to be the person that I was in my past. So if I'm
What kind of person was that?
not accepting myself, not good enough.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't feel like I was worthy of love or love myself even. Solution based, so sometimes it's hard for me to ask for help when I feel like I could find it myself. And so not being
What does it mean when you need help?
understanding a situation that I'm going through, from not receiving my paycheck at work or someone stealing from me at my locker, to conflict in a relationship or misunderstanding with a new housemate, and having to genuinely ask for someone else's help.
And is it mostly in communication, like misunderstandings?
Communication would be probably at the top of that.
Yeah, we're going to say like misunderstood.
That's great as well. I felt that way this morning after the meeting. I spent 3 hours on this topic for people to talk about something that wasn't even in the topic.
So you were at a meeting this morning?
Yes, I chaired it. I chair on Wednesdays at Walk the Talk. And
Okay.
a lot of times people just pick something and randomly go off the top. But I generally do a writing about it, and pretty vulnerable state to be in, and a lot of personal, transparent issues that I bring to the table. But a lot of times it sparks that fire inside of someone else as well. So a lot of times when I get finished meetings, it's like, Murph, thank you so much. That was great. I needed to hear that. You're always. So my therapist said that my love language is verbal.
Like praise, like, yeah.
Yes, and so I didn't get that recognition, and it's okay. At the end of the day, like that 3 hours of writing, I'm not doing it for the recognition, and I'm doing it for myself and my growing and my process. And there were people in there that I know picked up on the message and touched them.
Yeah. And I think that's common with, I turned into a square. Like that external validation, kind of maybe needing that.
I do.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it, but it's just a reminder how far I've come, because I could have easily taken something like that the wrong way in the past before I sobered up and started working on not just sobriety, but emotional sobriety. So I actually believe in, like, the loss is a good thing. It's not our object. They need to change our perspective a lot of times. Same with mountain climbing at the gym or getting to your last rep. When you're working out, you really have to push yourself to failure, and that's the only way you get better. So for me.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. So let's step back into the past. Prior to your successful sobriety, had you had other times in your life that you tried to get sober?
I had a few times, but you definitely know when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, I won't drink tomorrow, I won't drink the next couple weeks, or even make it a few days, but until you're really ready to make that commitment and find that self-worth, work in the program, whether Smart Recovery, AA, Dharma, and the list goes on. But saying one thing and expecting another is different. So I can say I want to be sober, but to expect to be sober, you know that you have to put in the work.
Yeah. So what in your past has caused depression? We talked about now that you have, you're sober and you can kind of see some of the core things. But what about when you were drinking? What made you depressed?
Life itself, thinking about traumas and events that has happened to me. These are all hand in hand and go really good enough. I really had a really dark outlook on life, thinking that there was no meaning.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that.
Life was like perfectly meaningless.
Okay.
There's going to be pain and malevolence and in the world, and it's something that you can't avoid. So I thought that was always why. The question is why God would we be going through this stuff?
Why God? Mm-hmm. So kind of hopeless, would you say?
Hopeless, yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I had a very victimization mentality.
Ooh, okay. Tell me a little bit about that.
Everything that was wrong with my life, I could easily blame for someone else. Wouldn't acknowledge my involvement from my relationship with my mom, particularly my family. Put myself in a situation to where sexual trauma could occur. To put myself back in that situation.
While you were drinking?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So as an adult, you kind of even made choices to re-victimize yourself?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very mature to see that difference of victim and adult decisions, and you knew you had this victim stance. Let's go a little deeper. What about depression in your childhood?
I did a lot of crying. I'll say that. It's very emotional.
Emotional?
I used to go to therapy in elementary school when kids didn't even know that word existed.
Okay.
I was talking to a counselor over my parents' divorce, and it affected me in a lot of ways. I got real shy and would not be direct, so I had a speech impediment. Again, that feeling of never being good enough, like an outcast. I always was really never alone, socially, but inside myself, I was very alone.
Mm-hmm. So you remember feeling depression even as a child?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And you talk about, you mentioned it. Let's make a whole nother box or circle for trauma. What kind of trauma have you experienced?
Trauma with my mom, that super malevolent, harsh word, physical trauma. I was traumatically affected by the divorce of my parents because I wanted to live with my dad and not my mom, and that was not a very fun deal to go through. The state of Texas definitely wants the kids to be with their mom, and I seen it a mile away, and so did everyone else. You know, everybody has their bullying moments, but this, my past with my family and that were the main factors of my trauma in life. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of physical trauma from, you know, when we're talking about the trauma thing, it actually is an awakening to actually just look at this and see, like, man, there's so many people out there that got so much more worse. And I remember my first therapist I got when I was recovering said, Murph, that's so painful. That hurts so much. And she, like, recognized the pain, but when I'm looking at it like this, I was like, I know this is going to sound arrogant, but it's like I could have handled so much more.
Yeah. Well, but don't invalidate your trauma, but also don't take a victim stance, right? Like, you know, there's that balance between those two of, you know, yes, there's always someone that has it worse, right? But that doesn't mean you minimize your trauma. It impacted you. Some of the things that you were saying to yourself as a child, you still say to yourself now. So the reality is how is it impacting you? How did this impact who you are today? And how do you think it impacted your addiction? Definitely. So let's, so you said you started using at 12.
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of substances?
Weed and
what is your drug of choice?
Alcohol.
Okay. But you kind of used...
everything. I started off as weed and alcohol, but growing up throughout high school, and I've experienced everything from DMT to ecstasy to the list.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like the addiction was associated with the depression? Like, were you self-treating?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good way to disassociate with my past.
Yeah.
Alcohol would bring me to the present, to where I just enjoy my music and my buzz, instead of sitting there worrying about anything that's from the future, in the future or from the past.
Right. So it treated your anxiety.
It did, temporarily.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I say, like, we have to acknowledge that substances work. That's why we get addicted to them, right? That it actually helps. If you had a horrible response every time you drank, it would be easy to stop.
That's interesting.
The problem is that you enjoy it. It gives you a way to disassociate, especially from the trauma, right? You know? And even just a few seconds ago, you were trying to minimize the trauma. But it was a coping mechanism because you thought you should be able to handle this. But you know, and then it spirals, addiction just spirals into another problem rather than actually fixing the trauma. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that one problem can be fixed and just lead to more, like the combustible engine, right? So that stopped us from walking, but now we got ozone issues. So pick your battles, right?
Right. And then that goes back to, okay, there's personal choice in this, and you know, people, I find it hard as a clinician, as a provider, to convince someone to stop using when they're not at that ready point, right? And so, you know, a lot of the new treatment programs are about reduction in use rather than, you know, complete sobriety, to help people get to some of the root causes, you know, to better make those decisions of sobriety. So that's where some of that comes from. But see, look at your whole emotional life on a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's wild. When I was looking over the thought map itself, I was like, man, what a tricky thing. But when you see it like this, really, I like it. I enjoy it.
Well, and I ask one more question. How does this impact your relationship with God?
Well, the relationship with God, I always think, for me, it's not an external one. I think it's an internal one. It sounds like everyone's looking for the answers out there, searching for different religions or searching for different understandings and ideologies, but I think that the relationship is found internally, and sometimes it is found.
But do you struggle?
I do. I
Fight
still
with
have
yourself, with your inner God?
I fight with having to have I call God love.
Okay.
So with raising,
But did you feel love when you were a child?
did not. So maybe that's where
Right.
the creation came from. But because I remember growing up learning Christianity and throwing in church, and then growing older and finding different means of a connection. And so I feel real guilty not to stick to that one doctrine. So personally, if asked, it's like I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian,
Okay.
I'm a human being. I know I'm loved, a part of it. Today my share is actually the topic, spirituality was the topic that I went over.
Okay. And what did you share?
It was a lot. I have it written down. It took quite a bit to put together, but one of the things that I said is, life without spirituality is just hell in disguise. Our will isn't strong enough to handle the evils of this world. And so for me, I really had to find that spirituality, that connection to love or the divine or the energy of the creation of life, because without something to pull me forward, it almost find it meaningless. Go back to the
Right. Going back to that whole,
dark outlook. So, but these are things that happen that help me find that. And so that's one of the things where I kind of have an ideal of, if someone asks why God allows evil in this world, is because without it, you wouldn't be searching for him. There would be no connection.
Yeah.
So it's really fine line, a very sensitive topic, but something that I definitely acknowledge myself is that, if I had everything handed to me, that connection, that power that I feel, that these emotions that I share with others, the smiles that I bring into this world, these random conversations in the elevator where people are like, I want to look at it that way. It wouldn't have been there without the struggle, without the pain.
And we talk about, we used to talk about, your spiritual health a lot and mental health, and with kind of the political climate around, you're just trying to proselytize, you're trying to, make me, convert me to your religion. There has been this kind of separation of, mental health and spiritual health. And I am a big proponent of people finding that, like you said, you needed to find that love. What do you think about the AA and the 12 steps of AA and that first step saying you're powerless? I have a personal opinion, but
I definitely see almost two sides of this. Some people can look at it as a spiritual program, but I think that sobriety, you need that connection. If you want to call God just a group of drunks, you got to find something stronger than your own will. It can be spiritually.
But you found yours within.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
And that's the real power.
But that also within, I do see it as as more of a electromagnetic or spiritually connected to something that's greater than myself.
Yeah.
Even though it's internally, we're all connected through this crazy thing called life, and we definitely have the ripple effect. Who knows how far it is? Who knows how far this mentally strong method reaches, and it's really very, very powerful. So I think that's part of the meaning by AA, the 12 steps. I think when it first started, it was definitely more of a direct connection to the Christian God. I do believe that, but with evolutionary of our consciousness and the way that society is moving forward, I think that you're kind of pulled in a different direction. So I've heard people say purple lightning bolts. I've heard people say group consciousness, and I've heard people say God itself. And so for me, it's more like the connection of something higher than just your own personal consciousness, because you can trick yourself Like I said, if you say you're not, I
Yeah.
can say that I don't want to drink, but tomorrow I'll be like, well, that happened to me and I'm drinking.
Yeah.
But with
One of my things around it is, you know, we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. You know, what you believe about yourself is true. And if you say that you're powerless, then you are powerless. And I would say that I believe in the Christian God, but I don't like that mentality of powerlessness, because it just feeds into these underlying problems of that negative self-talk of I'm not good enough. And so then if God doesn't come through for me, or this, you know, external power doesn't come through for me, then I'm just back to where I started, not good enough. And I do believe that God helps people, and I do believe that there's, you know, power in that external relationship. I just don't like the word powerless.
Yeah, you can definitely hide things in vocabulary, or they can be obscured and misunderstood. And a lot of words don't have the same meaning that they used to 3 years ago. Like people say, that's hot. And you're like, you're like well, that's not the same thing. So words evolve just as much as our minds do. I think the powerlessness aspect of it is that true first step of being completely transparent and vulnerable.
Oh, vulnerable.
So if you can admit that you're...
Oh, I like the word vulnerable way more than I do.
So if you can admit that you're powerless of alcohol and your life has become unmanageable, that's definitely bringing that to the surface. And you're now able to step back and understand what you need to work on. So the same thing like starting a new anything, learning how to draw or learning how to, you know, swim. You're powerless almost when you jump in that water. You splash around and kick and scream and do whatever you can, but you're still going to sink to the bottom until you reach out for help, or so someone else shows you, be God, the group, or your higher power. You're almost still powerless. So I guess it's a matter of how you look at things. I can understand too, they also say, we're going over the words, fake it till you make it. And a couple people would change it to act as if. So it's just how you
act
feel.
as if is a better way to present it. You're almost saying the same thing, but it has a more deeper positivity to who you are. Yeah.
Throughout my day where I'm working at my job, people will say, or people going through pain, they'll say, I'm okay. That okay doesn't mean anything. That's just a mask. It's something that, so I'm just saying that for the understanding of the words, you know.
Yeah. And it's okay to change them to resonate with yourself. Good. So what we do next, so when you look at this, you see like, okay, this is everything that's underneath this addiction. One of the most important things that differentiates the mentally strong method from other cognitive behavioral techniques is the organization. We often go into treatment and we have all of these things, and we're like, okay, I'm gonna get to the root of all of these things. And what you do for the different things might be different. So we have addiction in its own category, because, you know, remember back here, we talked about there's so many components of addiction. And the mental health treatment is just one of those pieces. There's some people that have to do medication-assisted therapy, you know, to get off their substance. Some people have to get out of, you know, the environment that's, you know, if they're in a relationship and that person is using, and, you know, there might be environmental decisions that they need to make. And so, you know, looking at addiction as a separate entity, not just enmeshed with everything. And talking about enmeshment, trauma makes your brain enmesh. When you've experienced trauma, you take a normal brain and everything just starts to emotionally enmesh. This whole area that's still impacting you today is kind of negative thoughts. And I would probably say that the not good enough is a core connection. And it's one that I personally struggle with as well. And you know my story, and a lot of my trauma is in my adulthood, right? But the things from my childhood of feeling like I'm not good enough impact how I respond to my adult trauma, right? So mapping it all out here to say, okay, this is probably, the not good enough is probably something you're going to struggle with your entire life. But you don't have to continue the negative thoughts. And you know, the more you stop the negative thoughts around it, the less you believe this. Okay?
I agree.
So you see how we're putting these into different categories. So the actual act of using the substance and enjoying it is a behavior, right? It's a choice. But all of the things underneath that are part of the addiction. And we want to, make sure that we're treating those separately, right? So, a lot of times in treatment, they talk about like 1 day at a time, right? That's that behavior, right? 1 day at a time, I can make that decision, 1 second at a time, or however you have to break that down, right? That's a behavior. But if you're white knuckling it and you're just, making that decision second by second, it can get exhausting and people can relapse, right? So making sure that we separate the behavior from the addiction, right? Because there could be untreated mental health concerns. There could be a biology of reward that the longer you're sober, the easier that piece is. We got to deal with this trauma, and we got to stop talking to ourselves negatively. Spiritually, I think you're in a good place. I don't know that there's a spiritual conflict right now. Would you say there's a spiritual conflict?
No, there might be misunderstood because I have like an esoteric Christian view on religion. I don't think that Christ was the only begotten Son. I think that we all can potentially live that Christ-like in nature, selflessly for others, not chasing.
So maybe misunderstood by your peers, but not misunderstood by God.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree. That's a great way to put it.
So it wouldn't necessarily be a spiritual conflict for you right now?
Not for me, no.
Okay. We're not worried about it if it causes conflict for somebody else. What about grief? What do you need to grieve?
I have this problem of comparing myself to others, so I think about people who've had it way worse, and I think that maybe I haven't truly grieved it. I talk about it and I'm learning from it.
Do you have children? Do you want children?
I don't have children, but I do have a relationship with Kayla, and she has Grayson, who's 6 years old, and I'm so cautious to the things I say, act, and the way I do, and that bond is, he's one of my strongest supporters, and he doesn't even know it. He looks up to me in ways that I never thought to get looked up at, but as soon as I had that opportunity, even with my sister's kids, I make sure that I do everything that I didn't receive, I guess, from time, understanding, listening, to laughter, most importantly, presence and being involved. So a lot of times people want their kids to do the things that they want, from dishes to whatever it could be around the house or in school, but you're not doing what the kid wants. So I don't know. I have this weird connection with children that people spot all the time. They think that, they call me Santa Claus, because everywhere I go, kids just randomly come up to me and give me hugs, but I don't know, maybe I'm still a child myself internally. I have a different playful outlook on life.
Do you love him?
Grayson?
No, this child.
My child?
You're the child you were.
I think I'm still meeting him. I think that
fair.
We haven't had enough quality time with each other. So people are looking ways to grow up. I'm looking for ways to still embrace my child, my inner child.
Right, because it's okay to be a sensitive man.
I'm okay with it.
Do you believe that?
I'm okay with it.
Okay, yeah. So grief may or may not come up later on for you as far as like, do you need to grieve, you know, the lack of a childhood? Like, you know.
I mean, I've been told, you know, that I'm an inspiration and I'm making an impact. And every time you speak,
But you have to believe that.
I have to.
It feels good when you get that external validation, but you got to go with the internal.
That internal reassurance is
yeah.
definitely a challenge sometimes. But I don't want to. Maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit or discrediting myself, but I think that it's to recognize. I try to recognize that as, you know, God living through me. Mm-hmm. I said today that.
And he made you. Now the things that happened to you made that kind of manifest in a way that you're not proud of, right? But the fact that you are a sensitive person is who you are. And you can be a warrior and be sensitive.
I believe too. I believe so.
So, a lot here. I'm going to give you the Mentally Strong Method book because I want you to kind of go and continue this self-evaluation. I do these maps on myself all the time for 10 years, right? But it's important that we don't just stay here, that we decide, okay, we can't fix everything right away, but what is a priority? And for you and your sobriety, you're making the right choices. I think, you know, you want to continue with the making those choices, right? But I don't want you to be white knuckling it.
Oh no! Yes,
right?
ma'am.
You know, because I know there's a lot of sober people that are literally just white knuckling it every day. I see two major things for you, and it's the negative thoughts, and you're starting to work on the trauma. Are you working with a professional therapist?
I am. I have quite a few people. I'm completely engulfed in my recovery.
Okay.
And trying to understand what.
Yeah.
Connect these dots.
Yeah. So, you know, your power of choice here is to, you know, do that trauma therapy. So back to, I'd like to leave every session with at least one choice that we're going to make that's going to be in line with our goals. Do you even know what your personal vision is around relationship?
I don't.
Okay.
When you say that, the first thing that pops into mind is just laughter.
Mm-hmm. Do you want one person to love, or do you want to just love?
So I have thoughts all the time about one person, that's fairy tale magic of love, which is out there. I see it all the time. But the feeling of love is so important to me. The verbal affirmations from groups, my meetings.
So you really want to feel loved?
Yes, ma'am.
Whether it be in your friendships, your intimate relationships, you want to feel loved. Okay. But what did you learn today?
One thing is almost obvious is you can't solve, there's not one all-cure medicine. Mm-hmm. It's definitely something I'm going to, you know, reevaluate every area of my life. It's hard to say, you know, I'm kind of shook right now. This is profound.
Okay.
This is crazy. And I've always said that an ego with the spiritual war, and that ego is not my own. That's the...
Well, it's developed by your environment.
Yeah, developed by my peers and what I thought would be a huge takeaway, and then leading all the way back to being misunderstood internally from what people would want from me what God would want for me, what I would want for myself. But all of this, really, I'm still putting the pieces together. I tell people that go rock climbing for the first time, when they get down, they're really shaky, and you can tell that they didn't really enjoy the experience. But when they get home, relax, and the dopamine hits, they realize they just conquered a fear that people don't get to do. Like 80% of the world won't conquer their fears. And it's wild. I was telling my coworker Caesar, who came to climb, he wouldn't even let go. So I had to climb up and convince him to build up the courage to let go. When he got done, I shared my ideas of stoicism with him. I was like, look what you did, man. He said, what? I was like, you conquered a fear. Most people can't do this, and they never will. If you could do that, you could do anything. And now I'm sitting in this chair, conquering my fears.
Yeah.
So it's
and like you said, this is a big one. So I'm proud of you. You did amazing.
I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I feel like I did amazing. I came in here with expectations of talking about, suicide attempts or overcoming and how far I came in my addiction and how I've been able to understand behaviors from my trauma. Instead, I really got a chance to do some internal reflecting that I haven't done in a while.
Good. No, this is amazing, actually, and it's I really appreciate your willingness and vulnerability. And going back to the question you just asked me, it's like, and then I answered it, and then I'm thinking, well, I shouldn't have answered that because you were just looking for that external validation, and who cares what I think?
So sneaky. I said that at the end of the meeting too. I was talking to Skylar. I was like, who cares if they picked up on that last line? That's not what I meant, but that's okay. I feel that was for me. Mm-hmm. This is definitely very important.
And when I give you the book, I want you to go through the personal vision chapter. And it's kind of that, not who everyone else wants me to be. Who am I and who do I want to be? In relationships, in career, in, just the different...
Yeah, I've got examples in my mind for people out there that I would like to be more... And I like to be more confident like them and embrace who I am. There's people out there that are just themselves, and I get to be myself, but people don't get to see it's still masked, still layered, right? I can pull off some layers and get to my goofy side of things and get to where I'm singing and really embracing the fruit of my the natural childlike nature. I think that's what, just more to the unstoppable force that I'm slowly becoming. If I continue on this way of building my life around something that it's like, you're not saying something is still a lie, myself. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's partly why I'm so sensitive to being lied to.
But when you talk to other people, what are you doing?
Yes, ma'am.
You're looking for that external validation, someone to tell you who you are. But only you can answer that question. For a couple weeks anyway. Do you do hugs?
I do hugs.
Yeah.
You did amazing. Thank you.